teachings. Your holy mind and still intelligence that understands the full extent of objects to be known. Your holy speech with excellent explanation is an ear ornament for those of good fortune. Your holy body is radiantly beautiful with glory renowned. To you who are meaningful to see, hear, and remember, I prostrate. Pleasing drinking water, various flowers, fragrant incense, lice, scented waters, and so forth. Oceans of cloud-like offerings, both actually arranged and mentally emanated. I offer to you the supreme field of merit. Whatever non-virtue of body, speech, and mind, especially those opposite to the three vows that I have collected from beginningless time, I confess each and every one with fervent regret from my heart. You strove for much learning and practice in this degenerate age, and made your freedoms and richnesses meaningful by abandoning the eight worldly concerns. Savior, we sincerely rejoice in your extensive deeds. Perfect, pure, holy gurus from the billowing clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of Dharmakaya, please let fall a rain of profound, extensive Dharma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued exactly as they need. May whatever virtue I have collected benefit the teachings and all transmigratory beings, and in particular may it cause the essence of perfect, pure Losangdrapa's teachings to shine forever. Sajipuki Chujimeto Tramri Rablishi Nidegempadi Sange Shindu Miteua Hidro Kunamda Shinlachu Pasho. By the merits of having offered this mandala to Lama Tsongkhapa and his two sons, may I, my family members, and all sentient beings be able to meet, practice, and actualize the teaching of the victorious one, Losang Drapa, who had a morality of eminently pure way of life, was courageous and extensive conduct of the sons, the victorious ones, and accomplished the yoga of the two stages of supreme bliss and emptiness. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalaka Niryatayami. By the force of having fervently requested in this way, hollow beams of white light are emitted from the hearts of the perfect, pure Father and Sons, and combining into one enter my crown. White nectar, the color of milk, flows from opening of tube of white light, cleansing all my sicknesses, spirit harms, negative karmas, obscurations, and their imprints, without exception. My body becomes as pure and clear as crystal. Now we recite 5-line Miktsema 3 times on the page 5. Migmetse we ten chen chen resi, dreame kempe wampo champaya, dupo malu jonze sawenda, kache kepe tsunken kapa, losandra pe shabla sowade. Migmetse we ten chen chen resi, dreame kempe wampo champaya, dupo malu jonze sawenda, kache kepe tsunken kapa, Losandra pe shabla sowade, mimetse we ten chen chen resi, dreame gempe wampo jampaya, dupo malu jonze sawenda, kache kepe tsunke tsongkapa, Losandra pe shabla sowade. And a prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now, holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings. Through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss! Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in a glory for fortunate disciples.
Sangye Jadon Tsojun Chonum La Changcho Bardo Dane Kyapsun Che Dagi Cheshe Geban Dag Roland Benje Sangye Drubar Sho Sangye Jadon Tsojun Chonum La Changcho Bardo Dane Kyapsun Dagi Cheshe Geban Dag Roland Benje Sangye Drubar Sho Sangye Chedang Tsojin Chonum La Changcho Bardu Dan Kyabsun Dagi Chushi Geban Dag Roland Penshi Sangye Drubar Sho Kangi Tuzi Nizonli Dawa Tamche Pambi Chere Tambi Chun Denze Kwadam Dela Changze Lo Namo Laye Gedan Lo Dano Jingi Tribon Dada Mi Gedan Lo Kunji Janum Chizam Tamji Gedu Dagi Chudendo. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, big boss. Kun boss leda tiringan boss.
Kaya so Gensin Sapa yun.
Genzi saba mare. Are you finished Nalanda Master Garden? Boss. Simzi Isra and talk brother. Kosa.
Gosan.
So
I was just joking there. It's just I'm teasing my friend.
Ani, thank you, Omzela. Wonderful Omze. New Omze. Omze sana color injila Omze.
Chant master segere.
Yeah.
Chant master.
Yeah, chant master. The jadang andu zanyimala lamram dread chegordine danganzu zanyimadi tagba mi berna manche ta mi jebuthe de ganza anzu ma saji chig ma ten rona tes chig deudoj mundos ro kaza chig chornang ro de ya ani tagda jingum mundos.
In the past, on Sundays, we used to do Lamrim teachings, but really on Sundays, we tend to get many one-day visitors, so people who will only be here for this one talk. So it's a little bit difficult for people who come just for once to slot into the middle of a long teaching program.
The lamrumgi gudun zododi lamgirbas laundi ani tan ran tan number sangibi bigita nanju cheding is the hakores the mena the stanyobodos tan tanyendero lamgirbas laundi 비 탈바다 탐진kimbi 살아야 로야기 다지 람거르마티 right the delabajariores.
This Tibetan word lamrim that we use, that literally means the graduated stages of the path. So so Buddhists, those who regularly attend classes like these, they'll be very familiar with the term. But what it means is the graduated sequence of mental paths that one develops within oneself, leading towards the attainment of liberation or omniscience.
The inju so on the tarset was tarset tarvi komba tarset di pita jingbali tarset
In Palatar?
jingshawa jigi damshagi jiyabana damshawa de lebayna deli tarbares pena ra manzo pena
Awesome.
re
But there I use the word liberation. So what does liberation or the state of liberation mean? So in our Buddhist context, it means to be liberated from a state of bondage, of servitude.
the digora da nganzu pena nganzu da rawa meba shenjigi ani tsamo la yobayna da tsamo dili soso tariyagi ani tablamji segre wasara da soso la ya rawa meba shengi ola tsudeba yobachiki sonanji yobayna da dili dendu logic zawini yomarawas suchila ya the dili tarbigi tabji segre was pena right. Re o didoj re kwanda.
This state of bondage, we can understand as it being under the power of others, something other than ourselves, so being under the power of others. So liberation refers to being liberated from being under the power, under the control of others, a state where one has no freedom, where one is not liberated. Then one attains a state of liberation, means one attains a state of liberation from being under the control of others. This is liberation, or the state of liberation, and it refers to our current our mind at the moment is under the control of others. When one is liberated, one's mind is freed from being under the control of others.
There's a bit in ancient race, the D the Tangla, the digital targuyana, on an Anzulaya Rama your marves. Nanzuchi Shanjiki one conalaya in the Yorves, Lavana. Tangazuchetan Geshe Tsultrim, and Nanzu Desan Lomba de Tawena, the Rama Lombares. Means some like Rama yours level, Rama your was, the Rama your Karana Rama your Marcelana. Peshe long longer was ra. The Yimba in ya, Nanzu Payabu Chevachivana, and Nanzu Kievala Ramande, Nanzu Shivala Ramande, Nanzu Gengo Chando Yomarda in ya, the Kashikash big Gengo Chadasra, and the Gengo Chaya, and Deva mentioned Gedrela, Ramamandoas. Tinzanganzola Rama maybe Netsu Mambush. Yoris. The deal tarvi tablamji yori meres no 아니 산지 좀 된디겠다 요리스 송로다 요리스 다디 탑럼 가르리스 라운디다 다 수드니 람람 디시고리스
This may sound a little challenging for an Australian audience to hear. It's said that Buddhism says you do not have freedom, because here in Australia we say, of course, we have freedom. But the Buddhist view is that your mind is under the control of something else. You do not have freedom. So that's quite challenging to hear. So how can I assert one doesn't have freedom? Well, let me ask the question. Do you or others have freedom over when and where one takes birth? One's aging process? Do we have freedom over this? And here, just as a translator to say, the word freedom literally means under one's own control. So do you take, so instead of saying freedom, I can say, ask yourselves, when and where you take birth, was that under your own control? Your aging process, or that's whether you'll age or not, is that under your own control? And your circumstances of your death, or whether you will die, is that under your control? So there we ask the question, to use now the other word, freedom. Do you have freedom over these? So the Buddha points out that one very much doesn't. But that is not necessarily the case. It doesn't always have to be the case, in that the Buddha himself had attained freedom. He was no longer under the control of others, but under his own control. And the Lamrim presents now to translate Lamrim, the graduated stages to train one's mind in order to attain freedom or liberation. This is, in other words, the state of enlightenment, or the state of liberation. That is what is presented in the Lamrim, the technique, the method to train one's mind to attain liberation. That's all.
당간도 제와리스로 제와디 가린 거레스라디 만줄이 깨월라 라마메바디 아니 신지기 또기 라만 초고르다 원하고지 규도 깬 강라야 맞대봐 만줄이 깨월라 라마메바 큐바리스 디기 텔렌도지 시우지 태바이나 라바이나 아니 게월라야 라마메바디야 아니 치월라야 라마메바디야 and disu sama ge lenj tanganzola ragira wasra tai re ti nganzola chewadi gogudo wasra
To be under one's own control, to have freedom, means that it would be independent. Because if you are dependent on something other than oneself. So to be independent would mean that one would be under one's own control, would have freedom. But if we look, we come to recognize that actually we are dependent on others, on things other than ourselves, such as causes. And with that reflection, we can again look, is our birth, our aging, our death, is it under our own control, independence, or is it actually dependent on other things? And there we can come to see more clearly that we are not under our own control. We do not have freedom. That's all.
redadi chidan chakbu doji yores dara chakbu da ani chi lojong sheda titolaya lojong sheda chemeba na ene des chakbu yungur de ine ya dinganzu samlo dang goya di ro di sam dang ba na kolaya ngoni suzulaya lobje dang an kanji suzul bi ta anchi 따자던 통제도 모습은 원해지 야침부 차야게 땐데 편도여서래스 로 디지디게 난수 깨발라 라마메 여다 메시온디 난수 간르신 깨발레세디 로 깨바딜이야 아니 교단 깨는데니 깨고르 고마레스 깨제시야바나 교단 깨는데니 깨여버디 당한수 원성도 통그러와서라 인자 다 아니 Kevadi, Juta Janatini Kevainza, Juta Janatini Keva Makeva, and Juta Jana Matemper, Keva Mevadi, nganzo rajik chotu ba na kewa tela ya rama meba di ro kewa tela ya rama meba di sewu jina haku tugres.
This topic can be quite difficult to grasp when one's hearing it for the first time, and especially if one hasn't heard it before and reflected on it. But there's great benefit from understanding it well. And I think if we approach it through understanding that if one doesn't have freedom, if one is not under one's own control, it means one is not independent, but rather dependent. And if we take the illustration of birth and we ask ourselves, how did birth come about? Was it independent, so was it a process where one had freedom, or was it dependent, under the control or influence of other factors? And to express this in a more usual Buddhist way, is birth dependent on causes or not? And this we can readily then recognize. Of course, there are no births that are not dependent on causes. Births are dependent on causes.
Nganzo kewa nganzo miri keondi miri kewi medela ya ani lu nga yik sumyungoras ti no ta yik tol da nganzo ani ta dendu tserik bagi ta ani ta peshe desan ta degu yosar was ra ta yik singin degu ta tin deban ta nganzo ta dendu lobjon chedeng zo mang lela yungor was ra tinza ta lu nga yik sumjingores ti nganzo tongde tinza ta di sumgi pi ta chi jujen da masona sum de chikbu chikyan reves labaina pe lab kal khabu yores
Kuna kari chikpa chikyang yina.
lu
Lu
nga
nga ki sum.
gyuti
Ah,
lu
gyuti.
yu khaim badi I sem gi gyu chag reves labaina ro ting anzu kal khabu chag wores ro dindi gi cheba cheondi ani nganzu ta mir keba ye mir keba lembi gi gyutela ya ta gyugen ha sobach gyugen ha
Gyuken, dene?
gyuden ken ta mambuch ra mandra mambuch ha sobasana ta
Gosam.
mambuch yungu yores.
Let's, in terms of birth, let's just look at the situation for humans. So we look at this in terms of birth of body, speech, and mind. So in terms of the body, there's a clear presentation from science, which is in accordance with the Buddhist presentation. So this is widely understood and doesn't need to be restated now. And I imagine all of you understand that and accept that. But then to ask, is the cause for birth of one's body and speech and mind, especially one's mind, is it really the same? Is the cause that led to the birth of the body the same cause that led to the birth of the mind? And in fact, if we look at it quite deeply, we'll see that there are many causes that need to come together for birth to follow, not just a single cause. That's all.
Teza diparala ya ta yanja sewu sogoya chigla nganzu lu dan zu lu dan semni zu nyamdu ruyati nyamdu chayati ti gyugen chigi yungores pena lugi gyula ya lugi gyu nganzu ngosun tongde ya di pena pami kudak tawti tadi chigi yobadi nganzu ngonsum tongu yorwas ro ina pami kudak samalo ani mi lu chagresana 야자 굽주 고구 차가 요 말아왔어. 차시 춘존 직 마도. 다 차시 춘존 직 차야기 깬 가르간 상고를 쓰라고나. 아주 야자 얘는 야담 깬든 상마이나. 아주 미기 통대 깬든 상마이나. 류차 투그리 깬드 만선 류차 투구 말세 칸주디 난 세리 바이나 페시치에 투구 말에 상고도. 로.
If the body and mind came from a single cause, then this is something that's quite unlikely. So the body would say generally comes from the sperm and egg, the sperm fertilizing the egg, but not every time. How would you say the sperm and the egg come together? Does it necessarily lead to fertilization? So therefore, it's not the mere presence of the sperm and egg that is required. Further causes are required for fertilization to come about.
어디다 디장 비기 류당 샘니 냠도 총원디게 샘디 벤다 넘버 산지비 쇼는 시원디 샘디 토마 메바니 여대바지 아니 비기 류라 류 주야게 아니 사변따고 간다질란 채바 있나야 아니 디다 냠도 아니 용야지기 내주 시고레스 대치디 당한주 루스다 샘니보디 베 샘디다 피기다 밤이 쿠다 참무딩님보디 냠도 촌니 디 루차야게 규칙이야 뉴무생 시고레스 로 뉴무 렘 세바 렘바색 뉴무디 시고레스 셀랭 자와디 마리바 디숨 토니 촌니 아니 나미기 샘테다 다디 밤이 쿠다님보디 수 뒤체네 아니 디기 쿠다디다 류주야기 깽 조치는 아니 류란단치 디송고레스
From the Buddhist perspective, the body and mind cannot come from the same cause. They certainly have an entwined relationship, but the mind, from the Buddhist perspective, has existed since beginningless time. And furthermore, for the cause for the body, of course, we point to the sperm fertilizing the egg, but that isn't the sole cause. There's also a requirement from an affliction, a consciousness, in particular the affliction of ignorance, which is required in order for the sperm and egg to lead to the birth of a body. That's all.
Tirda tichidige sepa da lemba taj pigi anin decha ki char to bajoras decha ki char to bati sawa ani mungba mari balaya tembige logic logenjin in the tigi shawanjin bachi manzu lu sam nyam do soya di lu trivia di manzu lu trivia di ani lo shinju logic lo genjinjiki jawan de kyordebach ya zigiyores.
What actually causes the body and mind to join together, to come together, is in some presentations we talk about craving and grasping, but it can be better understood as attachment together with ignorance. So the attachments and ignorances are consciousnesses. So they are what cause the body and of the new life and the mind to come together. That's all.
Number Sanjibi Shonalaya, then Decha said, Lodi, touching the Genji in Bachilia. Touching the Jacha Jan Yatambo could Genji in Bachilia. Munzi Chigures. Then something other talk about that, wrong easy sing marada, the Chagi pig to Gurgi Sig Jorada, and the attachment said, something it drew to you and the men and dogs. Kansana Nansu and Penalta Loma di Chitso Nalolaya, Mijacha, the Guchu Pesha Kogi Kogus love chocolate. Any Decha singing di Suzu Soy Trelaya, go Nijin in Bachilaya, Susu Messenolaya, Decha the Mena, any dig maybe soy Pesha Yorwas at the Ra. Also in Roger, me Kansas in the Yonson, Dolo Kansas canning. I Yonson, that deep is Yaja Yatam, Res Lavana. Samna Yaja Yatam, Kansas Sorcerer was. 인바이나야 피기 넘버 3집이 존의 셰빈 되자디 야자잔 잡아 로신줄로질이야 문진치 투그레스 다 로신줄로 인바디 문진치 투반 다디 견진리 슬라바나 민남주 영 로주 영 술지기 셈레 셰바나야 고투그로 와서라 다디 메나 되니 소수 메세 나올라야 피기 다지 차긴 소리를 개체주의 쓰대야지 칠로그니 좀 미지 용진 다디 독자리 슬라바나 돌드에 비마서 가부 차사리스.
From the Buddhist perspective, attachment is an indispensable cause for the coming together of the body and mind. But saying this, then I think it's also important to say, so English is certainly not my first language, so I could be mistaken, but I have a doubt about this word attachment that is used to translate the Tibetan Dirchak, because attachment seems to be used more broadly in English. For example, attachment is required within a family for the family to be close. But so it seems to be that attachment is used more broadly in the English language, whereas in our Buddhist context, when you hear the word attachment, it only has a negative connotation. So it's a consciousness that is not in accordance with reality. So if there are in English positive connotations with attachment, then that probably is not what is meant here. So I'll just say that because English is not my first language, and just to make sure that this is clear for you, that when the word attachment and other words are used, or sorry, scrap that, with the word attachment, just keep in mind that it refers to a consciousness that is not in accordance with reality. It's a mistaken consciousness. Doesn't have a positive connotation. That's all.
지당 캔자오라다. 완전 되차세 민zam기 아니 균진의 차이가 말이스. 배나 완전 다 장바된 인지라야. 라 되차기 민다샤바. 아니 야가르케비 송나라 마비용거레스. 라 임바 있나야?
Gyaga kiapa kisung mampo yore. Di Dirchak tang jampa
인지라야 되차기 민다샤바. 인지라야 되차기 민다샤바 딘디 용거레스. 임바 있나야? 디긴 되차디 뭐이게 착당 몽송 치비게 착바지어로 되차지어로 디 야자야다 뭐 말이스.
Just think about, take the mere word attachment in English. This does not necessarily imply that is a faulty consciousness, a consciousness that is not in accordance with reality, and it can be used in positive connotations, and such as referring to love or to compassion. But please do keep in mind that when you hear in the Buddhist context the word attachment, that it does not have a positive connotation. So any positive connotations that you have from your own culture relating to the word attachment, set those aside. When it's used in the Buddhist context, it only has connotations of that are negative, in that it is a mind that is not in accordance with reality. That's all.
다 간지 너드나 간지 로 견진 로 신줄로 마릭바당 딘디 코나라 땡땡게 아니 더 총롱진 촉슬롱땡게 되자저로스
아니 하그마 좀 건데게나 도드랍나
도드랍바이나 로 신줄로 아니 총롱진 촉슬롱땡게 촉슬롱스나고라
하그마 좀
자님 담마니 자님 직바 임바다 뭐등인기 총롱슬라르 촉스나 이데 연구 총이요라 이촉 코나라 파 사와이나 마사로라다 니가도 냠도 데토와나 어디서르질라거다
이네 건데케나 카리 당 남두기 콜라 디 저장에 단타 고톰소
되차기 로조라 되차기 로디기 율파따고라다
네네네
율라 파타 온디 율 칸라질 따바이나야 율 네루디 찍바이나야 되샤기 찍바 따투비요 말와 지기야가 지기 누가 있다고 하다 아 어딘지 로직이 왕게 먼저 깨와들 랭귀어 반자 아니 깨와디 아니 로 딘지기 샤만도 켜바레스 간지 뉴몬비 샤만도 켜바레스
Shenwang?
샤왕 야 샤왕
Shenwang, yeah.
인자 간주 깨와디 뉴몬비 샤만도 켜데바 텔레 수 타리아지 요르베스라바나 안 산지 좀 되는 요레스 다 디타르비기 람디 야다 람 텔야 럼바 담분 디치고 이번 숨바 두스 드로거스다 람된 나샤저라 텔라 람럼 세고레스
But in brief, what is meant by attachment in our Buddhist context is it is a mistaken consciousness in that whatever one has attachment for, the consciousness of attachment does not engage with the object, what one has attachment for, in a way that is in accordance with reality, because attachment has the function of exaggerating the qualities of the object, making something either more attractive or perhaps even worse. So the function of attachment is that it does not engage with whatever one is attached to in a way that is in accordance with reality, but exaggerates the qualities, the good or bad qualities of the object. So then to come back to taking rebirth, when one takes rebirth or is born, one is under the control of attachment. So one's rebirth comes about independence on many causes, one of which is attachment. Therefore, one is not independent. One is not under one's own control, but under the control of other factors such as attachment. Therefore, we do not take rebirth out of with freedom or independence, but rather dependently. So that is the case for us ordinary beings. For the Buddha, it's a different story. A Buddha has attained freedom or liberation. Buddha is free or liberated from this process and does not take rebirth under the control of other factors, but is rather the Buddha is independent. So how to attain the state of a Buddha? Well, that is the purpose of Lamrim, the graduated stages of training our mind in order to attain the enlightened state of a Buddha. That is the purpose of Lamrim. That's okay.
Terda dinda nganzugi ta Lamrim di ta Lamrim nyamlen chia ta laglen ta ya ta nyema la ro ta nyema la nganzu ta laglen ta ya chi yobaina teni kanzam jala ta tende ani nganzu Lamrim di nyamzlen to ya chanza nyamzlen to ya chi ta yungu yosares ro tinza hong geu dambo choge ta nganzu Drovik Devi Cup, when a new Kubik Cup nation, Kangalaya, and a Lamram Lalentariagi, Tablam Mamuson does, Mamuson yoris. Injimiji be cooked dodgela dechinera, and it legat some lurtani, Lamram Yamle, Chegoya Chetan Chona the Yakshiras, in a other Majonaya, Suzuki, that and Dro du nyal kanikavsia lamram nyamne chiachi then sunguyores ro.
Lamrim, these graduated stages in which to train one's mind. If one is able to do this all day, every day, then one will rapidly make progress. Now, one is not able to sit on a cushion or a chair all day thinking about these teachings. But if when you are going about your daily activities in the house, going to work, at work, one is able to keep these the topics of the Lamrim in mind, then one is practicing. One doesn't need to be seated on a cushion or on a chair to be practicing the Lamrim. one is able to do so at all times because it is a mental process. One needs just to keep one's mind in accordance with the topics of the Lamrim, and this way one is practicing. And to the extent one can do this, rapid development will come. That's all.
Tirabena the Lamrim Yamslen to the Matu Sadi, Tanjishu Deagi, the Numu Sadi, Rangu Numudi, Shuk Chong Drogiovana, and the Lamrim Gutovadi Yam Perigores. Lamrim Gutovadi Yam Drogiovana, Numudi Shuk Chair Drogores. Then Tini do Drogata. Tinza Numu Shuk Chong Droyag Tabshitres. Numu Shuk Chong Droyag Tabshidi Kaduna chair. Pena Nanzu Numu Dux Ma Chizonalama Town Digi Suzuki Penata Chik Decha Kiag Yur Shedan Kisag Yul and then Tado Kisag Yul in the Yungudanganzara. That does the Kazu's Tarim which to Vaina. Ani Numulaya Chignigores Ra Yungi Pangbi Numu Rimki Drip Sonrada Yul Ngamba said the Karadala Chagdan Kisag Yul Delaya Yul Ngamba Siche Deep Pambaina Kot Kisag Yul Medige and Chagdan Yongsa Koreomaras Ra Tinza Yungi Pambi Numu Rimki Drips Chigsongodas Ra.
Whether one is able to engage in practicing the Lamrim throughout the day really depends on the strength of one's afflictions. If one's afflictions are strong, one's mind will be very far from the Lamrim. If one's afflictions are weaker, one will be much more easily able to keep one's mind on the topics of the Lamrim. The way to think about this is if you take those old-fashioned scales with the basket on each side, and then you put metal weights and they rise and fall like this. Because as the afflictions become weaker, then our mind can stay on the virtuous topics of the Lamrim much more easily. But if the afflictions are dominating our mind, then the scale completely goes out of balance and we forget about the topics of the Lamrim. So here the advice is very explicit. Guard your mind from coming under the influence of the Lamrim, under the influence of the afflictions. And this is really a primary function or purpose of training one's mind, is to separate your habituation, separate your mind from the afflictions. So, for example, a skillful method is to prepare your mind, or prepare earlier in the day, perhaps in the morning. Think about what you're likely to encounter today. I'm going here, I'm doing this, I'll meet these people, these situations. And be aware that in certain circumstances, I'm likely to encounter situations or people or whatever it may be, wherein I'm likely to give rise to afflictions. So I may be encountering a situation today where I know I'm likely to get annoyed, or where attachment or perhaps jealousy is likely to arise and dominate my mind. Therefore, I must be on guard, because these afflictions only cause pain. They only cause me to suffer. So therefore, I need to be on guard, mindful of my inner process, so as to guard myself from coming under the influence of these afflictions. So you set this motivation before, and you retain your mindfulness, so that then when one later in the day is approaching this situation where there is the danger, the likelihood of one's afflictions arising, one guards one's mind. And then when one encounters this difficult situation, because one is taking care of one's mind, one's mindful, one's aware of one's inner process, then one can prevent the afflictions from taking control. And in this way, we keep our mind in accordance with the Lamrim. That's what.
Pena nganzu pugshinjung dosoge semgam de pe tsangma yorwasra. Nganzu le tebe hajang tsangma kunzu semdi le kasa 아니 밀레 고고타에 삼로요 말이 마비시에 삼로요 말이 가리 통바티 가리 템바디 밀레 랍투로 아
Mm,
베상마요레스 아니 차단 글로 숙침부 싸우니 요 말아서 다 콘솔라 가서는 콘솔 다고 거질라야 국조질라 아미 코바나나야 수치라 반지 대바인자 코심부지 대바인자 차단 요 말아서 띵 드라워도 저랬다 다 테니 마 요네 간주냠도 대 간주냠도 칼라서도 세원디게 테니 빼디 콜레야 콤시 독자로 사만 자리고도 왔어라 간주 니마로다 아니 별이야 주 별이야 보고 롱아 툭 듄라 캐난 야차잔 야다마 타와치 초그레스 라고라 로 듄니 타와치 초그레스
Lord Dun Badu?
로듄 차사나 타왈란 로초그레스 타와치
Ah,
데초그레스 다 춘중 공네 타와치 장에 맨날 야워를 못했다고 공롱간에 타와스 버려왔어 배 마스바 야구 차고 그랬어 가서는 비 추석이 검시 독자들 콜레야 검리 때에 그 뒤쪽을 종이어 말아왔어 아 춘유고는 타와치엔자 아 그때니 비기 아니 대주는 제 메시지를 샤너로 아니 산론 좋은데 야구 쇼 차고 그랬어
mm. Mhm. Double gosok. Ini Kyamkanumise Gunglo Nga Yindu Draba Chaksong.
아하
Longa, huh?
문제
There, gosok. We think of the situation of young children. They've recently, maybe a few months before, been born from the womb. And in that period in the womb, their mind didn't experience much in the way of anger and attachment. They basically just abided in the womb. And so when they're born and they're young, their mind is very simple, very clear. They're open and receptive, learning from what's happening around them. They have no thoughts to deceive or to take advantage of others. But those ways of thinking start to arise later. They learn from the family. They see the interactions within the family and between the family and others. And these ways of thinking start to develop and become habits. So in Tibet, the custom is only from about the age of 7 would one be able to ordain. His Holiness was a bit younger. He ordained at 5. And a benefit of ordaining so young is that from the age of 7, or in His Holiness's case from 5, at 5, is that one hasn't yet taken on the bad habits of society. One doesn't yet have strong attachments and anger, and therefore entering the monastic environment is very beneficial. That's all.
디자 간주다 지 나다 간다발이야 오늘 지다 냠는 지 되어 봐나 데스 엠바도질이야 사자 엠바도질이야 차담 망부 계사기 율 많이 받질이야 아니 데스 데네 곰잡트 와나 땡땡 팬도 연구였어리스 데니 땅 간주 가드이나 지 소수기 내가 가르치기 봐야냐 디 코로나 파셈 데니 내가 치는 줘봐야나 아니 삼론 담문다 차당 글로 망부기에라 아니 마기발이야 팽기어레스 기발이야 고고어레스 이 가르치 왔어다 남이 메바 아니 gebjur ngang felset namyang loti kigyo mares ro yulchig la pa semten ro lega che chogre suzu gi donam gi che do penjo do ya pen lega kharin che do pen menshe ba do jing ba na bi never hang ya pe ani semten lega che ba na suzu la cha di tola sam dang go ma le yung ro ro 다 never hang tola 콜에 펜섬다 콜에 참경다 덴지 랑 tola 상도 따니 쇼기 내가 고츠버니 gonda 내가 맞아봐도 다가랑 상도 따는 로샤바이나 소수 샘라야 팽겨레스 남양글로 뇽로야 셴라야 피기게 아니 소수 제비권에 라네 네바델야 로버체바나 야자 야담바 싸우는 자고 말이스 들이치온 디게 메세게 돌럼 두긴야 취치야지 야자담아 윤고 알았어 남이 메비 게브죠 난기 페르셋 게비 차와디 란싱 페리용 그레스
But I can certainly say with confidence that if I were to go to somewhere very isolated and remote, away from objects that either can annoy one or one can be attached to, this would be very beneficial for my mind. But the truth is, for not just myself, for all of us, this is quite difficult to do, to live a life in isolation, in solitude. So therefore, we need to, in our environment of many activities, it really is imperative that we take care of our own minds. We take responsibility for our own minds. To express it differently, we are mindful or aware of our own inner processes, our own thinking, our own thoughts. This is of great importance, because if we can be aware of our way of thinking, we can, as mentioned before, be aware of when we are entering a situation of great danger. In other words, a situation where attachment or anger may arise, and take care of our mind. And in this way, taking care of our mind before the afflictions arise, we can prevent them from arising. Before being overwhelmed by attachment or dominated by anger, watching our mind, taking care of our mind, we can quite relatively easily keep our mind away from coming under the influence of the afflictions. And one of the ways to do this is to keep one's mind on virtuous thoughts. Keep one's mind on virtuous thoughts. So there are many different professions or many different activities that one is busy with. But let's take an illustration of a medical professional such as a nurse. If she is using mindfulness well and can keep her attention focused on her patients, then her mind will be dominated by fulfilling their needs, caring for these vulnerable people in need. And this will be a mind, a tender mind, a mind of loving care. And this is, of course, a virtuous mind. Her mind will be at peace, will be light and spacious. And of course, her patients or his patient will benefit greatly from a nurse with such an approach. Moreover, the nurse being skillful in this way, taking care of his or her mind, will ensure that it is staying on virtuous thoughts, such as the patient's need to be cared for tenderly, cared for appropriately, the right treatment, etc. So therefore, the mind is kept virtuous and away from attachment and to perhaps wanting things to go their way or anger when things don't go their way. So this is how one can keep one's mind from distraction by keeping it on virtuous thoughts. And the more one does this, the more habituated one becomes to it. It starts to become second nature, it starts to become one's natural way to think. So this is certainly something that's not only very important, but very possible. That's all.
그래서 간지 수수기 그 단딩기 내가 세고로다. 로 수수기 장부 장장이 내가 다지 고마고야라 소바다 안지 밀라 느지체라 소바데다 고철라 드야디 카부로와스 디 마임비기로 수수기다 미지기다 아니 펜줄 간줄레 고고레스 랑간줄레 데사 고고레 사야고 카양고 고고레 베나타지 소설라 고고 푸투 영인지만 딘도놈라야 베샤 고고여라스라 힘바이나야 디 드리비 카브들라 베나라 디 드리비 카브들라 야차 야네 야담바 최던 톰바치 제요레스더라 야차 야담바 제요다 베나 칼라스는 종댕이지 바나 칼라드 뷰타부스 공long 야부지 단디 미츠 베샤티그지 텐자 비길레야 만뇌바치 자마치 소고 삼네 뷰타부스 소소라 고야 카르고바티 콘세티게 딜네 디니 kala sudi be rigba dream chinra tel any kolon sambuji kene sama da yabu sun teba na di kewa maimbi gyunzin chi amando as ro ta din da wa ta lega kharchi wa na ya pena khashi ta nga ngoshi ba dindi konzu tsama so ro da tsama so ro di labda tsama so ro da ta ji mezan tsama so ro di 야 다주 짬어스용디 삐기부도스 소소소 칸된 갈데바디 칸인 된 쪽도 삐기 짬어스 그런서 라제제고 삐기부들라고도 하다 아 tinza sem 삐기 남동 담은데 콜 고야기 균생 거래요 말했으라 리버 드림친 드바이나 나미 메바 게줄 낭기 페르세 야시 야도 용고였으라
This approach, I encourage all of you to take, because it will transform your mind, transform your lives. Keep your mind throughout the day, whatever your activities, on virtuous thoughts, on the Dharma. There are times when it's difficult, so especially if any of you are involved in employment that is less than honest, where your job requires you to deceive others, to take advantage of others, or perhaps there's some forms of work where you actually harm others. So if this is what you do, then it's a little difficult, and it's perhaps one's should reconsider one's profession. But for all others, this can be done. And you know, the advice of Buddhism is very practical. It's not only for those who live an ordained life, a simple life, a life of seclusion. Everyone needs financial security. You need to be able to pay for your home. You need to be able to eat and clothe yourselves. And if you have kids, then you know you have many expenses. So one needs to work and earn a salary, but one can do so in accordance with the Dharma. So there's a wide variety of forms of employment. I don't know what many of these types are, but those that I do know, I know people, for example, who are chefs, who cook for a living. So the advice for them is to develop a good motivation towards their co-workers, and in particular towards their customers. That today they are going to make food as delicious as possible with nutritious ingredients, so as to bring both a nutritious comfort as well as joy and happiness to those that they work with and those who get to enjoy their meals. So they have a motivation of wanting to bring benefit to all those they directly encounter, their co-workers, as well as indirectly encounter their customers. And with this motivation, they go about their work. And of course, their mind will most of the time be on the work, choosing the ingredients, putting it in at the right time, etc. So they will be thinking about the work they're doing. But their motivation is virtuous. Their motivation is joyful, wanting to give. And in this way, throughout their working day, they create so much merit. I have other friends who are cleaners. They clean schools or businesses or homes. So it's very simple work, but they love doing it. Why? Not because they have a particular attachment or attraction to cleaning, but whilst they're cleaning, they keep their mind on the Dharma. They have many prayers and meditation practices memorized, and these they recite, and they keep their mind on virtue. So they're not, whilst cleaning, complaining about problems in their lives or moaning to their co-workers. Rather, their mind is on their prayers, and therefore their mind is happy and peaceful. And whilst they're doing a very ordinary job, just that of cleaning, they do so with a mind that is happy and light and creating a lot of virtue. That's okay.
Kodini rigal degores, malini sasa rigal degores. Koran lega di labda tsamasoya. Kavgalaya chansa jevdigo hol chimbudini do. Tindi tsamasoya chigores. Ani the shoginga ulan drogoda, some the chusumadi land drogoda. Inayan shoginga ulan dropi tsamasos and drosos chigoro. Ani contentus then tsamos pigiudosa. Pigiudelasra. Gon dangonda, dangonanga kavalessan, Karen Yagaru the Kanda Chonsons. And I do sending unto the 다 gomba sawa shanya korya to sherwa ani nganzogi ani tanda kutongda chigdu suyore ani kuchigleya gomu sumdong sumje to spiwana ani sosu send figile cher dige ani da benjo dige nganzo da gomba shanya res dinda kupe mazwa yabudunga tanda rang ani gomu sumdong sumje pyugi insa 컨센서스 고바스를 다가는 차도네 레가디 되게 짱모스 된지 랍침부 말다 있네야 지 근데 그 칸던데 쳬르 상당원디 데 땅에라야 강아지면도 가보 쉬우진도 단은 그디 차도는 땅진 땅진 땅은 자자자도 땅은 이기우 쉬우 코사르사 로데우 빼총스사 그런가
Last night, a friend phoned me. He lives up in the hills outside Manali in India. Kagaba?
Maleni. Yes.
Maleni. Okay, Maleni. Okay. And he's a cleaner. He cleans schools and he cleans marriage halls. So to do his work, he gets up early. He gets up at 3 a.m. every day. He walks to work alone and engages in his cleaning activities from that early hour. And he loves his job. He loves his job. Why? Because he recites the prayers he's memorized, and in this way, actually, he's engaging in meditation while he's doing his cleaning work, and his mind is in a happy, joyous state, making and whilst he earns his living, he's making a lot of merit. And so he phoned me last night, and I told him about my plans to build this new temple, and my plans, what it's going to look like, and the fundraising work that we're doing, and etc. So I told him all about it. He was really excited at this, and he immediately offered to send me 3,000 rupees without any hesitation or thought. Immediately, he wanted to contribute. Gonda?
Double rupees ragu mare.
Rupee mare. Dollar se gere. Dollar se gere.
Rayo mare. Samajde.
Yine kensa gomo. Deni injike toklang aso di lab toki mare. Deni yine di gaga gomo re, huh?
Mare. Tanda nganzo Australia gomo.
Australia gomo. Okay. So again, was just correcting me. It wasn't rupees, because in the Tibetan they just use the word currency. So we don't say in English 3,000 currency, but anyway, it's 3,000 Australian dollars that he's sending, that he's offering, and he was able to do this with really a happy mind, because his mind is so engaged in virtue. And now he has an opportunity to contribute to this project. So he generated great virtue, and I too then slept happy, knowing that that he had created this virtue. That's all.
제자 다간지 개와생의 가두이는 지어야 되겠지. 그렇죠? 가두이는 지어야 되겠지. 가시다가 아니 뒤좀도 최지야라고도 대화인으로 들라고다. 근데 소소소는 그걸 당기로 해셨어. 오늘이 최지행이 되버용이지만 가두이는 제적도.
What I really want to emphasize to you is that you can, everyone can keep your mind on virtue at all times in the way that I'm describing. When people say to me, oh, I really don't have time to think about the Dharma, I'm just so busy, I have so many activities, I know that they are being influenced by these thoughts which are deceiving them, because our mind is always active, and we therefore, by being mindful, can keep our mind on virtue no matter what we are doing, no matter what circumstances we find ourselves in. We can keep our mind on virtue. That's all.
타마들이야 rigpa tambi chölangi shiki sech songyores rigpa tangba
Rigpa dampa.
suzugi ani rigpa pena kam meba chikta ani sebu yobi kaptulara sama yobi kaptulara ani chök tola samla chitangbayna lamsan hakutugres lamsan hakutugres
So nangcho lamsang hakogere kasi sem dangwa yare.
Chizan yobo rigpa tambi kaptula shela samtang tubayna ani 펜도치에 용거리스 람사하고서는 항마스터라
Those who have developed a mind that is really quite pure, for them, they can easily turn their mind to the Dharma, easily keep their mind on the Dharma because of their habituation to it.
다 리버 다음에 뒤지 랑아주 추준 유지sab시 나올이야 오늘 다지 치긴 다 kuyu ton tsu nangzu kam tangwa chaya tuzu chigi yorwas 아 chilogin zhongwang ton sachi melon zhongwang toni 아니 nangzu lubu kamdi 아니 르르 chaya tuzu chigi yorwas 다 디 쇼깅 아우디 찌기도 스라 쇼깅 아우디야 아니 도나제다 쇼깅 아우 야라마이나 배 쿠시마 요레스 라 쿠심부치 아 테네 미사마 야 란사비 투즈델야 사제 쿠교젤라 요바이나야 쇼깅아고 투즈 난생기 쿠심부디 요마레스 딘자 쇼깅아고 투즈델야 아니 직소즈 트위지야 자만체니 쇼그톨야 테스 삼단 데바이나 덴덴 아니 리버치에 연구요사리스 홍기교 담바 참말로 로 출렁 오늘 출려야 미지고는 출지 되는 속이 디케이션 슈츠가 왔어
Many of you will have the experience of when one is in a quiet, beautiful, scenic environment, one's mind becomes pure, becomes peaceful and still. And the way to create such an ideal environment where the mind naturally settles is to rise early in the morning, wash, and then sit down and reflect on the Dharma. There's great benefit to doing this, to getting up early whilst the environment is very still, because that helps our mind settle and be open and spacious. And this greatly aids our meditation. That's
근데 쇼기 추즈 숨바야 랑바이나 마치 중간을 들고 삼성 로드 끼고 말았어. 중간 요 말았어. 비치를 들어 삼성다 파티 들어 삼성다 다시 요라다 아 딘디 일로치에 용 말았어. 가서 그 디저들 요 말았다. 메디야 랑니 아니 더 간전저다 검자야 랑제 마도 셴바치 칸요 말았다. 저번나는 들었었나 저번이 니더라다 아 things 디 뒤서들이야 아니 샘디다 야자야니 야다 보기다 원이게 최고토라야 샤투야기 펜도베 전부 연구였어요.
If you imagine, perhaps some of you do it already, but otherwise, if not, if you imagine getting up at 3 a.m., what else can you do at 3 a.m. other than wash and sit down and meditate? You can't go about your various activities of the day, go do your shopping, etc. The shops are still very closed. If you have a day out planned, perhaps going to the beach, well, you're not going to head off at 3 a.m. to the beach. Or if you're meeting your friends, having a gathering, they're going to be fast asleep. They're not going to be wanting for you to turn up at 3 in the morning. So when one gets up early, one's distractions such as those really cannot yet be engaged with. They can arise in your mind and you can let them go. And rather, just sit down and meditate. Even if you're wanting to phone your friends, talk to them about something, they won't be wanting to receive your phone call. So this is a very clear way to understand the benefits of getting up early and engaging in Dharma practice early in the day.
제다 니자 그 뒤쪽 차네 뒤쪽 고랑 차네로 먼저 샘 뒤에 거기 저 일찍을 봐네 고야 소리지 소자가 더서라 유sem블은 로서 시험도 왔다라 유일생을 섬도 셈버 당사 거라 시험도 왔어라 다유 샘디 일찍을 봐 때투바나 대 기위기 초지라 봐 때투바나 디 쪽이 아니 개와숙치엔 페이고레스 개와숙치엔 젠고레스 하고토야 숙치엔 거레스.
Early in the morning, there's less distraction in that there's less activity that you can engage in. There's less for your mind to get involved with because you can't really start your various projects and activities for the day because it's just too early. So this helps make it easier to sit quietly, to rest the mind, and rest the mind on virtue, on the topics of the Dharma. And from doing this, so much benefit will come. That's all.
Mantasai. Share Mantasai. Children Taro Chisra.
Kondo. If you have any questions, then I've said quite a bit, so please do feel free to ask.
You mentioned earlier that the Tibetan word for attachment is negative only. And I'm just wondering, if attachment in birth is required, how can that be inherently negative if that's part of the path, like to enlightenment? And if in your birth you provide compassion and love to people, aren't you transmuting that into goodness somehow? Or like, is that not a step in the path? Or is it not something that's neutral at least? Why does it have a negative connotation if it is part of that pathway?
Then ngomong ato dochoki kola karen dochoki kola songso. Then dochak de tig nyempa dondak nyempa yare sampo yomade. Then ngato kieki gyu de nangla chik dochak de. Yini karen tene dochak de tig nyempa yimpa kyap sampo yimpa makyap. Karen tene karensa ngato kiene Dine ngato shimpa ropa je ngato ninji danjampa tewa kenjeni shimpa ropa je tugere la sopa. Dine kari jene ngato kiewa ki gyu dochak de chig sampo marebe.
Terda 단단한 쪽에 상기비 취스라고도 어머나 좀된 뒤 취 어머나 야기에 다 나는다니 마 달비게 취균 팀함에 봤다 베베기 난치스 딘디직 잘 봐나 야불도 스라 아니 근데 코나
디 카리 야포도 디고마송 디 낭처
아니 베베기 따당도 스라바이나 베베기 따당 저차도 독자린도 스라바이나 아니 디 간주기 최근 내든 이만이 도바사야 규지차 쓰기로 와서 가서 간주 넘버 32 최근 종콘 때와디 야간이 총바로 왔어 대한 조디 표기 난데 그 최디 난렌다니 총바레스 다 난렌다니 총비기 표기 난데 그 최주 디낭로라야 아니 되샤디 타치도 로신줄로인 바치라야 문제 치기어레스 제
고소
이질랍다
Supposed to say, so the Tibetan word dochak, this comes from a Sanskrit word, which would have been used in the Nalanda in ancient India, and they would have got this from the sutras, the teachings of the Buddha. So when the sutras were translated from Sanskrit into Tibetan, and the Sanskrit word from for Tibetan for attachment was translated into Tibetan as dochak, it was clearly stated in the text that this is only a wrong consciousness, a harmful mind. So therefore, this is how it is viewed within the context of Buddhism. That's all.
데니들다 계란기 지워디 초직네 덴버로지 인거레스 nganzu kewa din dwecha ki chen za nganzu ke ni ta me shan la pen do che go din za ke ji gi de ke chim bu rewa sa ti di chok chig ni da ran res ine tham chen ni sam da ma ya na nganzu kewa la rawa me ba so ya di kewa la rawa me ba ge la rawa me ba che wa la rawa me ba di dwecha ki wang ki chong ba res di chani ani nganzu dwecha di dukja sig go res.
What you said from one perspective is correct, but the perspective with which the word attachment is used is the following, that we have no freedom or independence over our birth, our aging, our sickness, and our death. We have no freedom or independence over that. And why we have no freedom, no independence, or being under our own control is because of the cause of attachment. So therefore, attachment is non-virtuous, or is seen as harmful. And that attachment is seen as harmful. That's all.
당한 딜리 쳇토아저 다디 딜 고약깔 가부요레 마토스 라 nganzu nganzu 저지기 로종 세 통부 맹인지기 ngan 저지기 로 kewa lenya야 되차라 네버도 뛰고 거레스 되차라 네버도 뛰고 거레스 아니 오늘 로종 세 통부 레온디 아니 kewa디 라왕기 끼투고 거레스 되차라 만데마 뉴문 tuksan la madenpa kewa len tuk yores kewa yungu kewa len yores
Ja, det chatsen gott om sån kunde gälla. Ngomong ye samna ha ku jong yin ha ma ju.
ore kemando ngando jikiro nganzu lojong yakbu gi chen tongbu ji le mebe meji kewa lembala dechala tengres tengores the lojong chen tongbu ji le baina kewa lembadi dechala tengu yo mares kewa lembadun dechala madem ba kewa ji lembaina ti kewa dilya rama yores shigogo mata yangya bigin mundu shendo rama meba shigogo mares rama meba gedro mares rama meba shidro mares tela rama tobi mares ti one gi deva deres tarwa tinza nanzu ti tsorya gi chedo rama mebi kewa lenji gi kyu ani chagdan nyumu digidi ani sama soya gi ta tavlam delaya ta namasanji gi chusek do asra
Ordinary people like ourselves, attachment is required and will necessarily be a primary cause in taking rebirth. So rebirth for us, we have no control over this, and attachment is a primary cause for this rebirth over which we have no control. However, those who've trained their mind well in the graduated stages that lead to enlightenment, they will still take rebirth, but without attachment. They will have abandoned attachment. They will have freedom from attachment. They would therefore have freedom over rebirth and aging and death. They have freedom over that. So this shows that attachment can be abandoned and that there is benefit to abandoning attachment in that one has a control over one's rebirth. And this comes about, this control, this freedom, is attained through cultivating the various mental paths that the Buddha presented. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's one question from Jen online. If you suppress our anger by separating ourselves from the object of anger, it is still possible to practice patience without the object of anger. Okay, so I'll read it again for the people in person. If you suppress our anger by separating ourselves from the object of anger, it is still possible to practice patience without the object of anger. Och det är toch la plak på det inne tapsitigen. Den är alltså kontro malang palche to control malang per je tang, to control kieki yu, tang loka degiore, di je tang chikre. Deni to di jena, to dadung, zopa, gyab to gerebe. Yul de dan namdu zopa gyab to gerekbe. Kazi to control kieki yu, tang loka musu degiores. Yini to deni yul de mena, to dadung, zopa gyab to gerebe.
Chedang nganzo the kongro bena nganzo mit kashi mit tugoda kongro sayaji yungudo asra. Mit kashi nganzo tugoda ko ani magawaji leagi ta yul ta misana yul dindi yor wasra. Ta dizu lagor mato shen nganzo kongro jesa yul tsawa nini mesa yul jilaya 패션 로사라고 말했어. 샘제요 말했어라. 로사라고 말했어. 카트나 간섬질라 도다 아니 사다 돌아야 콘로사야게 아 살지 다와이나 답사 사데라 콘로사야게 깜깜한 년가 도스라.
Die Petene egomason.
데이터 쇼바이나 살 간조 가서디 extend 차와이나 달라 다와이나 아니 답사가 사들라 콘로 사야게 년가 열어왔어. 간조 콘로 밤에 갑둘라 no chance.
No chance. Yine kere ngume sunye denge kosum. Di ha goye di lapien.
Konda.
No, na gonda lakares. A very common source for anger to arise is when we meet someone that we dislike. So just to say as an aside from the translator, the word anger, you should understand it in a very broad way. It doesn't just mean what we would call anger, but the whole spectrum of frustration, annoyance, anger, rage, hatred, all of us is included. So it can be slight annoyance to full-blown rage. And all of them are encompassed in the word anger. So to continue, so anger often a common source for our anger is people that we dislike. So perhaps some of them we can separate from. But the problem is anger is still going to arise. We may have separated ourselves from someone, have nothing to do with them anymore, and therefore that they are no longer a physical source of anger. But there are still countless other sources for which anger will arise. In fact, whilst we have anger within us, there are unending sources from which our anger will be stimulated. Lasso.
간지 콘도 타고 콘도 배 숙진기에 대해서 열도서라. 당한주 가시 소소스 샘다 하고 그러더라. 가시 뇌자 숙진 보여래. 가시 콘도 숙진 보여래. 가시 타도 숙진 보여라. 아, 됐지 말했나 타도기에 대해서. 디응구한자 텔라바비게 아니 타도 숙진 보 연구여 봐나. 타도 숙진 보 용사게 열대다 됐 타르 무시야 답시. 뇌자 숙진 보여 봐나. 뇌자 숙진 보 기대서 열대다 다 가서 타르 뭐라 아 아니 어두 제전이 아니 디답에 타르 무차디 뒤서 디다 되네 아니 뇌자기 견 따야 뇌자기 견 아니 삼로타야 콘트리 견 삼로타야 타도기 아니 견디기다 간주 소소스 샘드 마기와 지기도 왔어라 딘디기 삼로데스 타마이나 아니 제라 율드 테바이나야 아니 뉴무 마기야게 딘디 연구였어레스
Awesome. We all have different personalities, different minds. So it's our own individual responsibility to look in and see what we are most habituated to. Some attachment really is a big problem for them. Others, it's anger. Others, it's jealousy and so forth. So look for yourself and see what you're most habituated to and what sets you off. What are your triggers? Get to know these. And then it is, especially at the beginning, it's skillful to separate yourself from what sets you off, what either leads to attachment arising or jealousy arising or anger arising. There it's skillful to separate yourself from that. But, and it's a big but, don't leave it at that. Don't just be merely satisfied by, I separated myself from what would have set me off, and therefore I'm done. Now think about the faults of those afflictions, whether it's anger or attachment or jealousy or another one. Think again and again about the faults of that affliction, coming to see that affliction as one's soul enemy is only harmful, because to the extent one sees that the affliction is harmful, one will be determined not to let it arise. And then later, when one has trained one's mind well, when one encounters that same object that in the past you had to separate yourself from, you'll now be able to encounter it, and you'll be able to keep control of your mind. You'll be able to deal skillfully with your mind and prevent the attachment or the anger or the jealousy from arising. So this is important. When you separate from the object, then use that opportunity to reflect on the faults of the afflictions. Lasso kena deni drakia tokla konso mi shempa dria chik tangsong.
Yeah.
Okay. So I hope that's okay, Jen. And now there's a message from Tim, a question from Tim. Is it fair to say that to abandon attachment is the essence to rebirth in a pure land? So I'll read it again. Is it fair to say that to abandon attachment is the essence to rebirth in a pure land? Dini ngato shinkam kie ki dopayuna, dini ngato tso dochak bangadepe.
Shingam kari shingam. Then zambaling shingam kiala in deja pango mares. Ah,
Tsuba dewachen yamena di dantrabo. Sinak yinsamare. Pelche dewachen dantrabo yinsade.
Devajin. Naz zambaling devajin sigora. Ah, devajin shingam. Ah, pena dajik tundrugi pena nyava dan yidag sachi sungora di shingam devin zambaling shingam manzo mi shingam di. Ani dendro res lavra. Lada medang. Lama yisum de dendro silavra. Dendro shingam. Ta pena ane takshin pena ta anchik longu shingam jawo gyawa oba megi shingam sanji jizun chambon gombyugi pe ganden yiga chunzina soba dendrigi shingam laya kewala ane dosha mabamba ro keyo samares.
Ini dokam ki shinkam la kiana, dochak mapangna drigidu. Deni kari dokam ki shinka kia togere. Okay, gosom. Deni di dokam da madrel we shinkam de kanakashi sungsong di gomasong de yankya sungsang di gurumpese ki chikje.
Marin Gurumbuchi Pakistan. Gurumbuchi Shingam to Pakistan. Contrans Pakistan. Could say she did. Jawa Obama Shingam Jara.
Ingani di din songani hakamachong. Deni malabna drigido. Dokam da madrel we shinkam di labna drigido.
Re the Tabishing yet any longu shingams nagode. Longu. Chuku longu chukusum.
Chuku lungu re.
Longu shingam tawala. Sanji shingam. The Sanji shingam like Kevala. There's a pango grace.
Awesome. Again, first asked, which Pure Land do you mean, Tim? So he then gave a more extensive answer. So we can divide Pure Lands into two types, those that are within the desire realm and those that are not within the desire realm. So to be born in a Pure Land that is within the desire realm, there's no need to abandon attachment. However, to be born into a Pure Land that's outside of the desire realm, then attachment necessarily needs to be abandoned. So the Pure Lands outside of the desire realm, again, I mentioned a few, but I don't know these words, but they are where the Sambhogakayas are, where the Buddha, the Pure Lands of the Sambhogakayas. So to be born in such a Pure Land, where the Pure Land of a Sambhogakaya, then when was it an enjoyment body in English, then one needs to have abandoned attachment. But to be born into a Pure Land that is within the desire realm, there is no need to have abandoned attachment.
다시 나 나무를 먹어.
And thank you very much.
Final Lamrim dedication on the page 10. From my 2 types of merit vast space that I have amassed from working with effort at its practice for a grand length of time, may I become a chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds' wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all life's Manjushri. May I find the best complete guided paths of the teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings with the points of the path as I have discerned them. May I uphold the Buddha's teaching for a very long time, with my heart going out with great compassion. Whatever most precious teachings have not yet spread, or once spread have declined, may I reveal this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted boundless peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time, by even this graded path of enlightenment completed, due to wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all human and non-human beings who eliminate adversity and create conducive conditions for practicing the excellent paths never be parted in any of their lives from the purest path praised by all Buddhas. Whatever someone makes effort to act in accord with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may we always be assisted by mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere.